back to the Holy Hardwood podcast with Pat and Tony. Coming into the 2024 year, the Pelicans have just passed the 41 game mark. They're officially halfway through the 2023-2024 campaign, and things are looking up. Tony, how are we feeling? What are we thinking of our New Orleans Pelicans at the moment?
Yeah, Pat, great to be back with you. I think the last time we had chatted or discussed was uh, probably the game before the 5 game road trip, which was that Clippers game. So, all in all, when you think big picture, when the team goes 3-3 in that 6 game stretch where we said it's probably the hardest stretch of the season, you would take that any day of the week, I think, given the teams that you played. But I do also believe that the Pelicans left a few games out there as well. Felt like there were some gettable games there, and just depending on how things went and how things played out. It's a little frustrating that you couldn't get another win here or there, or a second win, but all in all, you come out of the road trip and that one game that you had at home against the Clippers, 3-3. Things are definitely looking up, like you said, and as well to go along with that, last night's win against Charlotte. So a lot of positives to come from all of those games as we get in here and discuss it all.
Yeah, and that's an accurate recap. Kind of like you said, you have a game, a 6 game stretch like that, especially that's pretty road game heavy, right, against the opponents that they've had over the last 6 or 7. Like you said, obviously some opportunities out there to potentially steal an extra game or two, which obviously, may end up playing a role as we come down the stretch here, as tight as standings are. But, all things considered, they played pretty good basketball, as we typically expect. They competed and played at a high level against a lot of pretty highly touted, high level teams, especially teams coming out of the Western Conference. So no surprise there. But the biggest thing to me is it feels like coming out of this stretch, and it just so happenly being congruent with it being the halfway point as we lead into the All-Star break here approaching shortly. It seems like the biggest thing to come out of it was just it seems like this team really has like a sense of clarity, right? It seems like they're really rounding into um, understanding what their identity is and what they need to do on a night-to-night basis that helps them stack wins and play to a style that makes them very difficult to be beat. You know, Not saying that they certainly don't have nights where they fail to do so, and they don't play with a lot of energy and things of that nature occur, but it seems like the nights that they do pull it together, and the nights that they do come out with a win, that they're winning in the same manner every single night. So I think that in itself is a big step in the right direction, and certainly poses well for them as they round this halfway point and really start looking towards the back end of this year and carving themselves out a solidified spot in the Western Conference playoffs.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more from that perspective. Kind of just hitting on that road trip or those last 6 games, and not really hitting on the game from last night. I think you kind of saw, this team win a certain way. They lost in a couple different ways. So, I mean, it was one of those road trips or this 6 game stretch where, you know, like you're hitting on, when they were playing really, really good, they were beating really good teams by shooting the ball really well, defending at a high level. Um, you know, against the Sacramento Kings, against the Golden State Warriors. Um, that first game against Dallas, when we had a limited crew, you saw all those in the wins pretty much look the same, but in those losses, it was a little bit different. You really had like a no show game against the Clippers. Denver, you were probably in it for a little bit. And then that Dallas game, I just feel like they just didn't come ready to play. Granted, they came back and had that lead late in the fourth quarter. So that's where I touch on where another way that they kind of lost. So they kind of had a blowout loss against the Clippers where they didn't show up, and Denver kind of took care of business as well. But then against Dallas, even though starting slow, we fought back. Hit some shots there, end up going up 10, I think, in the fourth quarter, and then our classic last of the 5 minute stretch where we don't seem like we can make shots, and those things kind of hiccuped us in that game. But you know like I was saying, lot of different ways that we either won, lost, and just really proud of the guys, I guess, because in very ways where you're saying you come out 500 and 3-3, you could have very well been 1-5, 2-4. So you're just happy that you get a 3-3, and then you're back here at home for I think a 4 game stretch or a 3 game stretch now after last night's game, and it's always the hardest, that first one back from a long road trip. And I think the team really responded well, hitting a franchise record. 25 threes last night, and a couple of the guys looking really, really well. Especially Jordan Hawkins, who I've loved to see his growth throughout the year. Finally, getting another opportunity in the rotation, and I think that's paid dividends for this group. I think we've both been really big fans of his, and I think halfway through that road trip, they started Willie started giving him some more opportunities, and he's taken the ball and kind of ran with it.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway, like you said, from those wins and those losses is um, it just feels like they know exactly how they want to play, right? The nights that things are clicking, you can see this team wants to play with pace. They want to shoot a certain number of threes. I think Willie's touched on the key metric there for them is 40 threes a night. Um, and then they're continuing to defend, right? And I think we were seeing that in spurts, especially when we'd have different rotations and different lineups of guys starting or not starting due to injuries or whatnot. But it seems like we've closed that gap, and those units have really melded together, and now we're really starting to see that throughout the roster and throughout the lineup. Especially when having Z in the lineup, right? That was an area where we were feeling like we were playing at a slower pace, and we were having a different identity night to night based on who was in the lineup, but. I feel like we've closed that gap, and this team knows how they want to play and what makes them, the toughest out on a night to night basis. I think a lot of that comes from this team has always been, you know, I don't want to say defensive oriented, but they take a level of pride in playing defense and making teams work and getting stops. And I think that that's been something that's occurred throughout this year. But obviously, when you're taking less and less threes and you're taking more and more, mid-range jumpers and things of that nature, right? Your margins get smaller, although you're playing a high level of defense, right? Just because if the other team's shooting a high volume of threes, that extra point each possession, it's harder to pull away from teams and to maintain leads when you're playing a high level of defense when you're only taking shots that are worth 2 points each possession. So I think just mathematically the focus on the 3 point shot and what that's allowed this team to do, especially in their wins, the last 3, 4, 5 wins you've seen, they're continuing to play that same level of defense they always have, but now they just have that punch, from the perimeter that pretty much just knocks these teams out and really slams the door shut and really doesn't allow teams to, fight their way back in. And you're seeing these games are being wrapped up a lot quicker, right? You're almost seeing that it's different, but in the same way, right? Some of those characteristics that those really good Warriors teams had was, everybody was oohing and awing about Steph and Clay shooting, but at the same time, they were a great defensive team. But that in tandem with the fact that they were so explosive from the perimeter, really just, I mean, if they had it going offensively, in contrast with what you knew they would bring on the defensive end, it seemed like something that other teams just could not overcome. And I think that's what you're seeing now is the Pelicans are really tapping into that style of play, and you're hopeful that this bodes well for the team moving forward, and this isn't we're not having to go back down that path of readdressing this and figuring out um, a different scheme or a different style. And I think coming out of last night, as we segue into that first night of this homestand, I think they took that even a step further, right? You saw a guy like, Brandon Ingram come out with a clear intention to shoot prime or perimeter jump shots and to hunt perimeter jump shots. Um, and it was great to watch, right? It was great to see him expose defenses for giving him any space because we know he's a high level shooter, right? We know he's incredible from the mid range and can hit tough contested shots, at a better rate than almost anybody in the world. There's no reason why that wouldn't bleed over into his perimeter shooting and his ability to knock down 3 point shots at a high clip. And we certainly saw that last night. You could see that his attention and his focus on finding those perimeter jump shots not only impacted his own game and made things easier for him and made him a more efficient shooter without having to work as much offensively, it really bled into everybody else, right? It just, you could feel everybody was thriving under that style, and everybody else was wanting to also, make that extra pass for another guy to get a clean look from the perimeter. And then you start sprinkling in guys like Trey Murphy and CJ McCollum, and then obviously as of late, a guy like rookie Jordan Hawkins, that really, when they're playing with that style, you really get to see how many weapons this team has in terms of perimeter shooting, which they haven't had in years past. So to me, that's the biggest thing, and it's great that they went 3-3, and it would have been even better if they went, 5-1, or even if they went 1-5. I really wouldn't have cared as much if they still would have came to this conclusion that this is how we need to play, and this is when we are most effective. So for me, that's what I'm the most excited about. Is I'm really excited to see over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Can this team continue to play with that style regardless of wins or losses? Right? Can they really commit to it and continue to evolve as a team offensively? Because I think it's just them being able to shoot that volume of shots from the perimeter, in tandem with their ability to hit tough contested shots in the mid range and play around the rim with Zion, and then obviously compete at the defensive level with certain guys such as a Herb Jones, Dyson Daniels, Jose Alvarado, and Najee Marshall and Stints. Right? They really have this great collection of styles that I think bodes very well going into the future and makes them an even more dangerous team with a higher ceiling.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown, Pat. And kind of over that last 5 6 game stretch, I think there was a lot of noise or discussion about Brandon Ingram's play. And off of air we kind of discussed what may have been going on, and what might be going on through his mind, and how teams are playing him now, especially since that Clippers game, and how they're bringing more doubles. And it seems like he kind of lost of his aggressiveness in a couple of the games. And we said we don't know if it's coaching, if it's BI, if it's just him saying, okay, well, we know, Zion and CJ have had it going the last few games, so I'm just going to be more passive and everything like that. But I think, yesterday or last night's game shows you truly what BI's potential is on a team with really, really high upside, and could, they get things together and start playing this way consistently. I mean, Brandon's a guy that, was pretty much unstoppable when he was playing how he was playing last night. And especially with all the shooting that around him. I mean, there's a night to night basis where I could say, hey, like we've seen this now. Obviously, we're not going to go hit 25 threes every single night. So the assists might not be up there and everything, but he's got the potential to make these open looks from all of his gravity that he's pulling away from people. It's now on just the shooters making shots. And like I said, they're not always going to make them at that high of a clip. But, you know, the way that these teams have kind of been taking him out of the game, he can't let that, force himself or force his hand to just be like, oh, well, I just need to become a passer. Where I think last night from the get go, I don't know if it was a coach saying something or the players and saying, hey, just go be aggressive, find us open looks, go find your shots, and we live with the results.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, last night's version of him, whatever it was, like you said, that was said, or whatever his mindset was, or whatever he saw on film, that's my favorite version of Brandon. That version that you got last night, that shot profile, everything about that is the most dangerous, the most high upside, the most impactful. Like everything about that is him at his very best, right? Like I mean, that was an easy 40-point night if he even makes 30% of the typical shots he hits from inside the paint, right? You'll never see Brandon go over 7 in the mid range, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, we were
seeing,
we were talking about it last night. I was like, when have we ever seen Brandon hit 7 threes and go 7 of 10 or 7 of 11, whatever he was, and 0 for 7 from the mid range? And like you're saying, like very easily could have been a 40, 10 and 10, or 40, 12 and 12. Like, and I think that rebounding too really got him moving aggressively towards that offensive end. And when he gets going downhill and he can attack the rim, pull up for three and find those shooters, I mean that, like, how do you guard that as a team? You know, that's just, I don't know. It's a great thing to see.
well, yeah, but a lot of that is is self-imposed, right? He's got to make the
Mhm.
conscious effort of, deciding what that shot profile is. I mean, I think the numbers would probably say that he averages anywhere between 14 to 16 shot attempts a night, right? So call it 15 shots a night. Obviously not taking into account shots that he's fouled on, but essentially 15 official field goals. For me, I think at least half of those, right? Seven of those have got to be 7 to 7.5 need to be 3-point shots, right? And I think then at that point you're going to have a mixture of those other seven, and some of those are going to be getting to the rim, and some of those are obviously going to be in the mid range because he's highly effective there. But I think the point is he needs to pick his spots, and there's a time and a place for when those shots should be had, right? Earlier in a game, I think he needs to be shooting more threes. He needs to help stretch that floor for everybody else. If he's hitting shots on the perimeter, it makes him even more impactful when he decides to put the ball on the floor and get to the rim. And then at some point, right, as the game slows down in closer games and you need to manufacture shots, that's when you find that 2 to 4 mid-range shots a game that he's just creating looks for the team, and you'd imagine he'll hit those at a 50% clip. So I think like last night, that needs to be the mold for him, right? He needs to be shooting, and obviously 11 or 12 was probably maybe a touch high, and I think one of those was at the buzzer that he threw. So he had anywhere between 10 and 11 legitimate 3-point looks, and I would love that right on a night that you're hitting. But I think you've got to be at a minimum around 7 to 7.5 threes a night for him, right? And I love the way he was taking them. I think maybe two or three of them were catch and shoot. I love the fact that he was shooting them off the dribble and shooting them in transition, right? It raises his ceiling and the ceiling of this team to a whole nother level when he's having to be guarded that way. And I think that truly will make everything a lot easier for the rest of his game, where, that's a place that he already is thriving and is incredibly difficult to stop. So, um, obviously love to see it. It was great that they were falling, but I don't care if he goes 0 for 10 on the next game. I need him to continue the volume that he showed last night, and to still have that same level of drive to find and hunt those shots, even if they're not going in, because it's gonna even out, right? He's gonna have games of both, and more times than not, he's gonna be around 4 or 5 of 10, right? He's not gonna be 7 of 11, but he's gonna hit a fair amount of those, and it just makes everything so much easier.
Yeah, and you go with it being easier, but you flip it. I mean, that becomes very difficult to guard because you don't know what he's going to do. Like you said, he's going to have a couple catch and shoots, but then last night he also had a couple pull ups. And then when people start respecting that jump shot in that transition, that's where he pulls that quick hesitation or a move, and then he gets right to the basket. Or he, gets to the middle of the paint and kicks it out to those other shooters. And so at that point, I think it's just regardless how he does it, it's going to be a win-win for everybody that's involved.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that would point to the fact that it wouldn't be. It has to now be a focus that you can't then regress back to saying, okay, well, I'm only shooting one a game. And I think part of that was he's been someone who, in the flow of a game, if it's there, he takes them, but he's never been someone who has hunted them. Last night, I think, was the first night I've ever seen in his career where he truly hunted 3-point shots. He was looking for three. He was turning down other looks and other opportunities to shoot threes. We've seen games where he's hit, 4, 5, 6 threes, and a lot of those have just been in the flow of the game, and they just happened to be where he caught the ball, or he was working off of somebody else getting a double team, and he still shot them. But last night was completely different. Last night was a guy that came out with a style and a something he was focused on, and saying, every single time I have space from behind this line, I'm shooting the ball. And that's where you saw that was the best version of him. That level of player who's able to do that and to shoot that amount of threes at that volume, and on good nights make that amount, makes him jump up a whole nother class of player, right? Without that, he's probably a top 20 player in the league. But doing that, and continuing to, like you said, impact the game on the defensive end, rebound the basketball, and continue to play make at the level he is, that's where you start knocking on the door of, okay, this can be a top 10 guy in the league, top 10 player in the world, just because his offensive game would take another leap.
Yeah, I mean it's exciting stuff to see, especially like I was saying, coming off of a stretch where a couple of the games he wasn't playing in fourth quarter, so that's why his numbers might be a little low, and then There's a couple games if it's injury or being sick, he was on the injury report like that, or just game to game, it just hadn't been going right for him, and it was really good to see to him to kind of get a get right game here with Charlotte, and besides him, just really impressed with Trey Murphy and Jordan Hawkins' shooting ability off of his big night the other night, and now that you're seeing some consistent minutes, and we got to kind of have that discussion as CJ, Trey, and Hawkins. I mean, what better three shooters in the league right now? On a team that on a night to night basis are gonna you're gonna be picking other guys over those guys because CJ all year has been shooting about 45%. Hawkins and Trey, they're climbing the ladder as well with the more minutes that they're getting and the more games they're getting under their belt. So it's becoming a real issue for these teams to plan for him, especially. And Hawkins is the one last night, especially just licking his fingers because he's getting all these open looks because they're obviously trying to stop the Zions and the Brandons of the world. And at this point, it's just more repetition and just hitting those shots for the team.
Yeah, and I think Jordan's really the stir or the straw that stirs that drink when you talk about those three guys, right? I mean, CJ's been doing what he's been doing not only for his entire career, right, but you've seen him adjust his game this year to even take on more of a focus to, like we said, hunt perimeter shots and be willing to shoot those. And obviously Trey has been this way for 2 years now, but there's a and all due respect to those two guys, right? They're both very good players, and a guy like Trey with his size, right? He's got a great upside and continues to get better and better. But there's something different about the way that Jordan Hawkins shoots the ball and the way that it looks coming out of his hand, and there's something different, and it's hard to put your finger on it, but it's palpable, right? You can feel that there's something different about Jordan Hawkins as a shooter that, like you said, it just seems like it really unlocked this group, and it's just added them another dimension. And I think that, right, for the longest time, you were the coaching staff, and I think Willie in specific was fighting back against this because obviously there are still times where he is going to get taken advantage of on the defensive end, and he'll have growing pains as a rookie, whether that be turnovers or fouls, right? And that's going to happen, but his impact on the offensive end of the floor and the explosiveness that he brings to this team is something that they can't not play anymore. He has cemented himself in that rotation. He's not coming out of the rotation. Nobody's going to take his minutes. He is way too valuable. I mean, arguably, he might be the third most valuable guy on this team, right? I'm not saying he's the third best player, but his impact on a night to night basis and the direct correlation that his performances have on those other two guys and what they're able to do um, is larger than anybody else on the team, right? Even when CJ's shooting it great and things of that nature, I don't think teams are going to fear CJ as a catch and shoot guy the way that they do Jordan Hawkins. Hawkins has some of that feel of guys like a Klay Thompson. Obviously, nowhere near the player of a Steph Curry at this point of his career, but he has that feeling of where it's like if he gets a clean look, you expect every single one of them to go in. And as he continues to get more and more minutes, and they find these rotations that really suit him to get and generate more shots, I mean, you're going to see his uptick go from, I think he probably averages 5 or 6 attempts a night now, just due to some of the up and down. That this is a guy that there's no reason you can't find him 10 looks a night. And at the clip he's shooting it at, some of those nights are going to be 7 or 8 of 10, right? And he's going to completely blow the doors off of other teams just because of how explosive he is from the perimeter. So, absolutely blown away with Jordan Hawkins at the current moment. And I would say outside of a guy like, Victor Wembanyama, who is the clear cut, like he is the diamond in the rough of this class, and I understand that, and for good reason. There's no reason that if you told me in 5 years, if you did a redraft, I wouldn't be shocked if you said Jordan Hawkins is the number 2 pick in this class because of the way he plays in the current game and the impact that has, right? It's just, it changes everything with him on the floor.
And one thing I truly love, obviously, I love his shooting ability. I love a guy that can just shoot the ball, and but it's just like he has no conscience. Like
Yeah.
he gets into these games, and he honestly could go over 10, but then the next one he's like, "Well, I'm gonna make this one," Like
Yeah.
he has no fear, he has no conscience. Like he could have the worst game of his life for the 30 minutes, but then the last 2 minutes of the game, he would be the guy. He's like, okay, give it to me two, 3 times in a row, and hits three big threes and wins you a ball game.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely does not care what's happened before. He carries himself, like a veteran already. And like you're saying, like all the great shooters, there's just a look, there's just a feel. Like you can just see it where it's like he knows. And props to him for being a professional guy for that stint where he went down to the G League for a game. He hasn't been in the rotation. Obviously, has still been getting his player development work in, and comes in that first opportunity when all those guys are out and basically has 34 that night. And he's just like, oh, I'm just ready to hoop, man. That's all I really care about. And
Yeah.
it's just a great thing to see. And like I said, that trio of shooters, especially if you're going to this brand of basketball, which we kind of said since the beginning, if you're wanting to play fast and have your defense lead to your offense and having to shoot 43s, I mean, I'm a happy man having those three guys shoot at the clip that they're shooting and getting the attempts up. Like you said, any of those guys could shoot 10 threes a game. And
I think all three of them should through. I mean, if that number is 40,
mhm,
I mean, I realistically, you'd like those three to each shoot around 10 a game, and then you're gonna have Brandon, hopefully, like I said, at that 7 to 8 on the high end, and that gets you to around 38. And then obviously you're gonna have a couple here or there from Herb. You might have one or two from JV, depending on the matchup, and like you're right there. But I think there's no reason at all those three shouldn't average 30 attempts a game from them. And I think that that's probably the blueprint now, and that's where you're going to see them shift to and really go to. And I think one of the other thing that's impressive about Jordan is typically you'll see young players, especially that are playing next to a very established other, guys that are in their prime, like a Brandon. Obviously, Zion's still pretty young, but he's a big name guy. Like at no point is he getting off the ball to like look to bail
mhm.
them out and find them. Like he's hunting for shots in that group, and I think they respect that, right? Like he
Yeah,
believes.
he's definitely not reverting like to them, which,
No, he's not. He's
like you're
he's
saying,
wanting the opportunity, and I mean, and I think part of being great and doing that is you have to be a little bit out of your mind, right? You have to have almost a level of unrealistic confidence, and he has that. He possesses that. He believes that he should get the ball every time down there. That like he gives that team, and I'm sure he has all the respect in the world for guys like Zion, Brandon, and CJ. But in his sick mind, he believes the best chance for us to get a bucket is me shooting the ball, and I love that, right? And that's a little bit of what Trey possesses a little bit of that, but you can see through a little bit of Trey's, right? Like Trey's confidence level and his aura that he has as a shooter is not yet of the level of a Jordan Hawkins, right? There's not many guys in this league, if like I mean maybe two or three guys in the league that you feel that same level of aura, and for him to have that already only 40 games into his professional career and him really not getting a whole lot of opportunities in totality is pretty incredible. And I think he's vaulted himself to a place where he's damn near untouchable. I mean, there's not much you could offer this team to move off of him just because of his current impact and what he could be here for the next couple years, right? I think that this guy's a player that has a really really good opportunity to be one of those special guys from behind the arc.
no doubt. I mean, it's just been a great thing to see. I think we both have wanted to see him in the lineup, and we kind of knew or could see from the beginning when he had a little bit of game action at the beginning of the year on how he could truly, make this team better. And now teams are having to scout for him. So the gravity he's even taking towards a scouting report, and it's not just like he's a catch and shoot guy. Like he can put the ball on the deck and hit a 18-foot, 20-foot mid range shot. I mean, it's not like he's limited by any means, just to catch
No,
and shoot threes or anything like that.
no,
I
I
mean,
mean he's a
he's
20 point per game scorer today. If he's given a consistent amount of minutes on a night in, night out basis, I'm not saying he's going to average 20 because of this. There's a lot of other, mouths to feed on the offensive end, but he is certainly a 20 point per game level player today already. If he got no better, he can manufacture you 20 points a night just because of, like you said, he's not just strictly a stand still catch and shoot player. I mean, he can catch and shoot it if he has space, but he can put it on the deck. He can shoot off the dribble. He can come off screens and he can hit in that, like you said, 18 to 20 foot range. He can work. I would imagine another level of he can work in the pick and roll and shoot off the bounce. He's got sneaky athleticism. You'll even see that he's a couple times he's gone to the rim and he's looking for contact and looking to play above the rim. So, I mean, this is a guy that is rapidly vaulting up, the list of NBA conversation. And, we've been having conversations that ultimately have led to like, how do we get Trey minutes and how do we get him into that starting lineup? And a lot of that was bypassing Zion to do so. But like the development and how quickly Jordan is coming along, he's going to force his way into that starting lineup. He's too good of a player and too impactful to not be on the floor 30 minutes a night, right? And for this team, right? That's good because it gives them another avenue to continue to build around those two main pillars. But they can slide him in there, and right, there's obviously all kinds of dynamics that come into that, right, with guys like Herb and whatnot. But like this is not going to be a guy that you can park on the bench and is going to be coming off the bench and is a spacer. Like that's not his role. He's way too talented of a player for that to be, his 6 month outlook, right? Like this is a guy that come playoff time is going to be one of your most five important guys at all times to be on the floor just because of what he can do on the offensive end of the floor, right?
Yeah, and for my sake and for the team's sake, I'm just happy because I think we both thought eventually he was going to crack this lineup. And my thinking was, oh well, it might be a little bit after All Star break, and then at that point you're kind of you know, struggling for time to get him minutes and get him acclimated before a playoff run if you get the chance to be in the playoffs. But, I like how they kind of right before this halfway point in the season have kind of figured this out. And I'm sure it was a very difficult, discussion or conversation Willie had to have with some of the other guys that he might be playing minutes over. And, the last two games, Jose really hasn't played much just for, some garbage time here or there. So I know Jose being a Willie guy that's been there through thick and thin, and through that one playoff series we had, and he was big in those moments. So I'm sure it's very tough for Willie to make that call and for Jose not to be on the floor. And obviously everybody's competitors here, but at the end of the day, he has a certain skill that this team desperately needs. And I'm just glad, at the halfway point, it seems like he should be locked into a rotational spot as your, seventh, eighth man, or however you want to crack that and minutes wise and everything like that. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, it's a great revelation, and like I said, I think it takes this team to the next level, and these things turn around quickly, right? They're back at it tomorrow night against a super talented team, a team that they certainly have history with in Phoenix, and it's going to be a good matchup. It's going to be interesting to see if they can match up firepower for firepower when looking at a team like the Suns, and it's another great opportunity to keep working on these things that you're working on and really mold your identity, right? Phoenix is going to be a team that's going to want to play with some pace. They're going to want to get up shots, right? So this could certainly be a track meet. And the Pelicans are going to have to come ready to play. So, looking ahead to that game tomorrow night, I think that's another great opportunity to continue improving. But, it's one of those games where it's time to put your stamp on a game, right? It's time to come out, get yourself a big win, play the way you want to play in front of your home crowd. And I think you got to send a message to a team like Phoenix, who, um, you know, despite their record, I have all the confidence in the world, whether it's via play-in or if they sneak in that, in the back end of that sixth spot. Like they're going to be a team in the playoffs. That's going to be a team you're going to see, and that's more than likely going to be a team that you're going to have to get through to get where you want to go. So I think it's critical to come out and impose your will on them, and set the record straight from the get-go that they're not a team that can mess with New Orleans, right? New Orleans has got to take advantage of that and take responsibility for that. And I'm eager to see, right? It's an opportunity to grow and see if they're able to do that because I'm sure they're listening to the same message there internally. But at the end of the day, right, it's a lot easier said than done, and they're gonna have to come focused and ready to go because that's a good group across from them.
Yeah, really excited about that game. Like you said, I like the head to head matchups. I'll be interested to see, kind of who matches up with who tomorrow. Big game feel, like we always say. I love a big game feel. It's at home. It's Phoenix coming in. We have that history, barring not the same roster, not the collective group over there for Phoenix, but a lot of good talent over there and a lot of good talent on our side. And I know those fans tomorrow night in the SKC are going to be rocking. But before we kind of sign off here, I wanted to just kind of pick your brain on what are some of the things, maybe since we are at this halfway point, that you'd like to see in this second half of the season, as well as the team. What do you want to see them, maybe get better at or see them do? But for me personally, I'll just start out and say, I want this team to be in more clutch situations. I want to see if they've learned from this first half of the year on how can we finish these games, how can we get a couple clutch wins. And I think that'll be imperative for this team moving forward, if they get that opportunity to be in the playoffs, as well. It's going to just help them immensely. So I am hoping for a lot of close games in this second part of the year against a lot of good teams, a lot of good coaches that are really going to test them, and see kind of how they're fare with that. Because I think this team's getting better on a night to night basis, and you kind of have seen that. I think 15-8 in their last 22 games, so you see it from that perspective. But I just like to see those moments that are the clutch time, last 5 minutes, hitting your free throws, getting to the sets that you want to do, and ultimately let those players decide, yeah, the outcomes of these games, and see if they can pick up some clutch wins here.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great one. That probably is, like you said, that's probably number one on the list. That's the most important thing they need to accomplish and improve at to get where they want to go. Right? They're already a pretty solid team right now. I think for me, it would be, um, you know, don't be afraid to go like all the way in terms of leaning into this style. Right? Like don't back up from this if you take some losses that you're unhappy with or you don't make shots. Like you aren't going to be able to get to where you want to get to ultimately, and whether that being getting to a Western Conference final or maybe down the road next year, hopefully having a chance to compete in the finals, right, would obviously be awesome. You're not going to get there without playing the style that they're playing, right? This is how you have to win. This is what creates the biggest advantage for you, in comparison to what you already do well, is you've got to be willing to shoot the ball and you've got to be willing to shoot it at a high clip and be able to live with the results, right? They have too many good shooters to be afraid of doing it and back away from it if they have a poor shooting first quarter, right? Like you've got to continue to shoot the shots you need to take. And for me, like you said, I would love to see them in a lot of close games. But at the same time, I want to see them playing in the right way. I want to see them playing in a style that is, you know, something that they can lean on going forward. I don't want them just to like play a certain style to win a certain game. And yeah, that's great. You got the win, but you're not improving, right? You're not raising your ceiling compared to teams like the Clippers and the Nuggets. Like that's how you even out the gap there. And then when the floor is pretty much even in terms of playing style, right? That's when I think you have the edge because you are deeper, right? You are very talented on the top end of it, and then you have all this versatility that you've built out in terms of guys like Herb and Dyson and guys of that nature, like a Larry Nance, right? Like that's when you're able to start defeating those teams and being the best team in the West is whenever you even out the differential that these other teams have over you just due to the style that they play, right? If you're shooting the same amount of shots they're shooting and making somewhere around the same clip, then it just becomes head to head. And then I think that's where this team really can take that next step because they have all these great pieces in place, but they're, you know, without playing the style, they're competing at 80% because just the margins are too hard to overcome when teams are shooting so many threes and playing at that level that it's hard to win at the rate that you need to win at. So for me, certainly agree with your takeaway. Number one, they need to learn to close games and work together as games get tight and not to go away with or to go away from what they're doing. But secondly, is they have to fully lean all the way into the offensive system that they're wanting to have in place and just fully adopt like this is who we are, this is what we're going to do, and they can't go backwards.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Pat, there. And then just before the close here, I just wanted to just ask you a question. Um, we had seen that the Pelicans did trade Kyra Lewis, uh, away yesterday to kind of relieve some money and get us under the tax. But my question is, do you think the Pelicans have a 5% chance of, making a run this year and winning a title? That'd be my first question to you.
I mean, 5%, that's not very much. So I'd say yes, because 5% just isn't a very big piece of the pie. Um, but I don't think you should make moves simply out of the fact that it's to win a title, right? Like, you have steps that you need to accomplish before you can confidently put yourself in that class. And I think there's things that you need to do or can do that make that a lot more likely, right? Like, sure, everybody's goal is to win a title, but I mean, if you asked everybody in that organization and this fan base, like, what would like is a successful season if this team gets to a Western Conference final and plays good basketball? Like, yeah, that's a huge step, and that's something that you should be trying to position yourself to do. Because at that point, if you're one of the final four teams remaining in the league, anything can happen, right? Like it's about setting yourself up to get there, right? It's kind of like the Miami teams of the past couple of years. Like you wouldn't really pick them to be there, but it's like, well, once you get to the Eastern Conference Finals, like it's a completely different ball game. It's 0-0. Like anybody can come out of it, and I think that's what they need to do. So yes, to answer your question, do I think they have a 5% chance? Probably, but that's not my metric, and that's not my goalpost. My goalpost is can this team find a way to get themselves into a Western Conference Final series?
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was heading at. Like, if you have, like you're saying, any inkling of this team maybe making a run, like, is that the grounds for you to say, hey, like, we've got this solidified team, but with the deadline coming up, is there a move that could basically, not ensure that, but give you the best possibility? Or obviously, if you think that the team currently constructed as it is could still make that run as well.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, yeah, there's definitely things you could do um, that take you to a whole nother level, right? But you still have to continue to play and improve the things that you're doing now. Um, but yeah, certainly, I think they're at a point where if they continue what they're doing right now and they're playing good basketball, and you see that they're heading in the right direction prior to All Star break, um, I think you got to have some tough conversations. And I think if not now, when, right? Like, all things considered, knock on wood, you've pretty much had everything kind of go as you'd need them to go, like in terms of health. Like, this is the healthiest you've gotten out of Zion, right? You don't know if that's guaranteed in the future or what that looks like. So if it's me, right, like I've got to be taking a serious look at what can I do to maximize this roster now. Um, because as we know, doors in this league they open and shut very quickly, and they usually open and shut earlier than you think. So this year the door could swing open for them earlier than they believe that it rightfully should, right? If you think this team could contend in a year or two or three. But at the same rate, if you sit on your hands and do nothing, that door can also slam shut earlier than you believe it typically would. So um, I think especially if this team can get to the 4 spot by the All-Star break, or is knocking right on the door and everything's headed in the right direction, then I think you've got to take a swing and you've got to do some things that um, maybe have a certain level of risk, but have a lot of reward to it because you have a lot of pieces in place that gives you a legitimate shot. Like I said, if you get to that Western Conference final and things are clicking, you have every chance as well as the other 3 teams in the league to hoist up that trophy, right? And things would have to go well, but it's your job to give yourself the best chance. And I think that giving yourself the best chance is going to require maybe an additional move.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was kind of getting at, and I think you answered that perfectly. Because it's like one of those things. Like you've loved what JV's brought to the team this year offensively, and hasn't missed a game, has been tough, but on an expiring deal, like do you go out and get a big who maybe has a couple years on his contract, and you ship JV out of here? It's just another tough call. That's just kind of the thinking I'm thinking of. Like if you got to get off of JV since he's expiring, and you can get a big maybe that has a 2 or 3 year contract set in stone and can help this team progress in the way that we need them to progress. That's something that this organization and Griff and Trajan and all them are going to have to discuss, like you said, if they can especially get to a certain point by the All-Star break.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the clear kind of one everyone's looking at is JV, right? Obviously, you can't commend JV enough for his availability and his professionalism, and in that manner, it'd be tough to lose that. But you also you have a ceiling with JV, and I think that's fine for now. But it's hard to maximize that because there's not going to be a lot of situations where you can rely on the things that he does well because of his deficiencies, and we've talked about that at nauseum, right? Like everybody knows what they are, um, and you can still be a good basketball team with him. Don't get me wrong; he's still a good player, but to get where you want to get to, and to have guys on the floor that need to be on the floor to give you the best chance to get there, that's probably the area you need to focus on and the one that you need to improve. And certainly, there's guys out there, right? Is it going to cost you assets? Is it going to cost you things? Of course it is. There's going to be other teams that covet the same amount, the same type of guys, but I mean, I don't really think there's a better situation in terms of other teams that they could easily plug in a guy in that spot, and suddenly the teams you look at them a lot differently. Like, whoa, like who can this team not be, right? Like that. So that's the clear move for me. And there's a couple guys out there that you'll continue to monitor over the next couple weeks, but um, playing Monday morning quarterback essentially, where if this team gets to where they need to in the next couple weeks and you've got a chance to do it, I think you've got to take a really, really, really good look at it and ultimately put your money where your mouth is and push the chips to the table and see what you can do. Because like I said, man, it's you don't know when the opportunities are going to present themselves, and if things are heading in the right direction, I think you're doing yourself a disservice and the organization a disservice not to say, hey, let's at least let's give ourselves the best chance to go as far as we can. So that's what I'll be waiting to see what unfolds.
Love the insight, Pat. It's always good hearing from you and kind of pick your brain on what you're thinking with this New Orleans Pelicans team. Who sits at 25-17 and fifth in the West. So a lot of interesting things going to be coming down, like you said, in the next couple weeks, and huge game tomorrow against the Phoenix Suns.
Yes, sir. Looking forward to it. As always, it was a joy and a pleasure to get on here and talk shop with you, and looking forward to the next time we can do it.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Take it easy.